This man killed more people than BTK, Ed Kemper, Jeffrey Dahmer, or Richard Ramirez. But his recent arrest and conviction are barely known outside the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Maybe that's because he didn't kill young, attractive people. He targeted elderly women in their own homes, smothering them with pillows to make it look like their deaths were from natural causes. His name was Billy Chemirmir, and he's alleged to have murdered as many as 24 people before he was arrested in 2018. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to my channel. And if you're a subscriber, welcome back, and thank you so much for spending time with me. If you're new here, my name is Delaney, and I'm a true crime writer and all-around murder nerd. And on this channel, I like to talk about really horrible stories with really horrible people. And I tend to cuss a lot. So if you're into that sort of thing, go ahead, give it a like and subscribe to my channel. If not, that's cool. You do you. Now, let's get back into the story of Billy Chemirmir. Our story starts in northwest Dallas, which is one of the wealthiest areas in the entire state of Texas. The median income there is about 20 times more than the median in the rest of the state. It's also the site of quite a few upscale retirement and assisted living communities, one of which is Edgemere, a 16-acre gated community with, quote, lush landscaping and stunning Tuscan architecture, where every detail and daily experience is created and cultivated. It was there, in this distinctly desirable address, where police stopped a man for trespassing in April of 2016. The man told police his name was Benjamin Coitaba and he was an employee, but both of those statements were lies. In fact, the man calling himself Benjamin Coitaba had been up to more than just trespassing. Earlier that same month, 86-year-old Catherine Sinclair had been found dead in her apartment. Her family had immediately suspected foul play, noticing blood on her pillow and a missing safe. They filed a homicide report, but neither Dallas police or the staff at Edgemere seems to have followed up on it. So when Benjamin Coitaba was caught on the property, he was just given a warning and told not to come back. If police had looked into him even a little, they would have found out that he was not Coitaba, but actually a man named Billy Chemirmir. Chemirmir was born on December 8, 1972, in a small village near Eldama Ravine in western Kenya. He was the 8th of 9 children born to Joel Chemirmir, a senior village chief, and his second of 3 wives. And just for reference, polygamy is commonly practiced in the more traditional areas of Kenya, and it's been legal there since 2014. Anyway, after Joel retired, he and his 3rd wife, along with several of his 28 total children, including Billy, moved to his farm in nearby Solai. That's where Billy would grow up. Neighbors there said they never saw any violence in the Chemirmir family, and they described Billy as quiet and humble. When he was in his 20s, he moved back to Eldama Ravine and stayed with his maternal grandmother. There, he and his brothers were known to drink too much, but they were generous and well-liked. Again, neighbors described him as the kind of guy who would walk away rather than get into a fight. There he got engaged to a local woman and the two had a son together, but he didn't stick around for long. In 2003, 2 of his older sisters helped him to relocate to the United States. The sisters owned a nursing home and so were able to arrange for Billy's visa so he could come and work here. This seems to be how he got his start in the elder care industry. During that same time, he had a second job at a used car lot, and there he used the ID and social security number of his cousin, Benjamin Coitaba. Now, his immigration status has been a hot subject of right-wing pundits, especially inflamed hemorrhoid who wished to become a real boy, Tucker Carlson. That was based on the initial erroneous reporting that Chemirmir was in the country illegally. He was, in fact, legally in the United States and had permanent resident status, probably thanks to marrying a U.S. citizen in 2004. But they got divorced in 2006 after his wife said he abandoned her and she couldn't find or even contact him. Anyway, once he gained permanent resident status, he cut off his ties with his sisters and struck out on his own. He worked for a company that contracted out freelance elder caregivers for about 3 years. But he was not exactly keeping his nose clean. He had a couple of arrests for DWIs in 2010 and 2011, but then in 2012, he was arrested again, this time for domestic violence. His girlfriend told Dallas police he had come home drunk from a strip club, and the two began arguing. She later went into their bedroom, but he followed her in and began punching her. He then grabbed a small pot and hit her in the back of the head, then kicked her in her back. She called 911 and he was later arrested, but his court date was delayed until 2016. It was in June of that year, 2016, when Chemirmir turned up at Edgemere again. When he was asked for his ID, the officer saw that he had two sets, one in the name of Benjamin Koitaba and one in his own name. So he was arrested and charged with criminal trespass and giving officers a false name. But by this time, he had taken two more victims there, 91-year-old Phyllis Payne in May and 94-year-old Phoebe Perry just 2 weeks before he was arrested. A couple of weeks later, Chemirmir pled no contest on his 2012 charge on his girlfriend and the criminal trespass and false name charges. He was sentenced to 70 days in jail and fined $2,000. But he was released after 12 days on good behavior. When he got out of jail, he knew not to go back to Edgemere, so he traveled up the Dallas North Tollway about 8.5 miles to the Tradition Prestonwood, another luxury senior living community that had only opened its doors the year before. On its website, it claims it's just like home, only better. There, Chemirmir would take the lives of 9 more victims. On July 20th, 2016, just days after Chemirmir got out of jail, 82-year-old Joyce Abramowitz was found dead in her apartment. After her death, her family discovered that some of her jewelry was gone. On July 31st, Juanita Purdy was found in her 4th-floor apartment. Later, Purdy's daughter realized that $28,000 worth of her jewelry had been missing. On August 19th, Leah Corkin was found face down on her floor. Her daughter was immediately suspicious when she noticed her mom's freshly styled hair was a mess and there were makeup smudges on her bedroom pillow. And her wedding ring, which she never took off, was also missing. On August 29th, Margaret White was found dead on the floor of her 4th-floor apartment. She was missing her emergency key fob and her wedding ring. On October 2nd, Solomon Spring, another 4th-floor resident, and the only man alleged to have been killed by Chemirmir, was found dead in his bedroom, surrounded by blood. Crime scene photos showed some tools at the sink, even though he had not requested any maintenance. The following weekend, on October 8th, Norma French was found, also without her wedding ring, which she also never took off. The next weekend, the 3rd weekend in a row, on October 16th, Glenna Day, also a 4th-floor resident, and Leah Conklin's next-door neighbor was found dead. Just days before that, she had told her daughter she was thinking about moving because she said, "All my friends are dying." On October 28th, Doris Gleason's body was discovered in her apartment. Her daughter became suspicious when she saw that a necklace her mother always wore, even to bed, was missing. Yet despite all their family's suspicions, their deaths were listed as natural causes and no investigations were done. Then, in November of 2016, a suspicious man was spotted at the Tradition Prestonwood. According to a Dallas police report, the man was dressed in a nice suit and carried a leather satchel. He claimed he was a maintenance worker there to work on the pipes. The report also states that the man, who isn't named, but his description matches Chemirmir, had been spotted there by residents several times, saying he was checking for pipe leaks. Police didn't take his ID or arrest him. They just told him to leave and never come back, and then urged the Tradition Prestonwood to tighten their security. After this second close call with the police, Chemirmir seems to have taken some time off, but when he did start up again, he moved farther north to Parkview Elderly Assisted Living, another upscale senior living community in Frisco, which is just north of Dallas. That's where, on September 17th, 2017, Marilyn Bixler's daughter found her dead in her apartment. her body, quote, perfectly positioned between the couch and the coffee table. The back of her hairstyle was messed up, and her glasses were bent and missing a lens. Later, she would discover some of her mother's jewelry was missing, but once again, her death was attributed to natural causes. Then, in late October of 2017, a 93-year-old woman was attacked at Parkview. The woman, who's not named in any of the reporting, told police that a man claiming to be a maintenance worker knocked on her door and asked if she needed any work done. When she told him no, the man forced his way into her apartment, knocked her from her walker to the floor, then placed a pillow over her nose and mouth, suffocating her. The woman said she started praying, believing she was about to die. The man then took her jewelry box and left, and after that, she pressed her emergency alert button. She would later identify Chemirmir as her attacker from a photo lineup. Chemirmir must have known that his last victim survived because he left Parkview and moved on to Preston Place, another luxury retirement community about 10 miles south in Plano. Between October 31st and December 10th, 2017, Chemirmir took the lives of at least 3 of the residents of Preston Place: Minnie Campbell, Diane Delahunty, and Mamie Del Mia. And police believe there was one other victim, but they haven't been identified. All of them were found in similar circumstances, lying on their beds or the floor, and with missing jewelry or other valuables. But again, because they were all elderly, their deaths were ruled as natural causes and not investigated. In late December, Chemirmir apparently returned to the tradition Prestonwood because that's when 90-year-old Doris Wasserman was found fully clothed, lying on her bed, deceased. Then he seems to have changed up his pattern, moving away from the senior living complexes and instead taking victims from their private houses, away from surveillance cameras and security guards. On New Year's Eve, 2017, Carolyn McPhee was found in her home just blocks away from the other senior living facilities. 19 days after that, Rosemary Curtis met with the same fate as the others. On January 31st, 2018, 87-year-old Mary Brooks was found dead in her condo. Her daughter testified that after her death, her mother's safe was missing, as was most of her jewelry, including wedding rings and a distinctive coral necklace that she always wore. After that, for whatever reason, Chemirmir decided to return to Preston Place. There, on March 4th, 2018, he took the life of Martha Williams. Just days after that, Miriam Nelson called the property management and told them that an unfamiliar maintenance man had come to her apartment to supposedly check on a leak, but she had never reported any leak. The people she called apparently did nothing. She would be found dead in her apartment just 2 days later. 9 days after that, Ann Conklin was found in her apartment, just like the others. The very next day, on March 19th, 2018, friends of 93-year-old Mary Bartel came to her apartment to check on her since she hadn't showed up for her normal walk with them. They found her unconscious on her bed and called 911. After paramedics revived her, she told investigators a chilling story. I'll let her tell you what happened.
And so I was at the computer. It was about 8:30 on this Monday, March 19th. And I heard this very insistent rapping at the door. The door was opening inward, and my eyes were just fixated on these green rubber gloves that I saw. And I knew instantly when I saw those 2 green rubber gloves, number 1, I should not have opened the door. Number 2, my life was in grave danger. I tried to push the door shut, but my perpetrator was 45 and I'm 91, so I didn't have any success in pushing the door shut. So he was inside in my apartment, and he said, "Don't fight me, lie on the bed." So I did as he said, because I knew course, as soon as I lay down on the bed, she told me to lie down on the bed. Anyway, he just smashed a pillow down hard over my face and my chest, and I just couldn't breathe. And I tried to move this left hand under the pillow to get to my medical alert button. Anyway, it was totally impossible for me to even, the pillow was slammed down so hard over my head and my chest that there was no way I could even move my hand toward the medical alert button. So anyway, after, I don't know, 3 minutes or however long, seemed longer than that, of course, that he was just using all his weight to keep me from breathing at all, I passed out.
She was also able to confirm that her attacker had stolen a box containing her jewelry. Now, luckily, a neighbor had noticed a silver Nissan Altima that was out of place on the day of her attack. He even wrote down the license plate number, which led police straight to Chemirmir. Which, can I just say, thank God for nosy neighbors, because the police and security sure as hell weren't doing their jobs. Anyway, with that information, police began to tail him, and it didn't take him long to fuck up big time. 2 days after Bartel's attack, officers observed him returning to his apartment, which was in that same North Dallas area, carrying a red box, which he then tossed into a dumpster. When officers looked into the dumpster, they saw that the box was actually an ornate Oriental jewelry box. Inside it, they found several items, including papers with the name Lou Thee Harris on them. They arrested him for the attack on Bartel on the spot. They found several incriminating items on him, too. An envelope full of $2 bills, several pieces of women's jewelry, and a set of keys. Inside his apartment, they found even more women's jewelry and a set of medical scrubs. The officers were able to use the keys to open the door to Harris's home, where they found her lying on the floor, deceased. Her body was still warm. Nearby, they found a pillow smeared with lipstick in the exact shade she was wearing. Chemirmir claimed he got the box from some dude who'd sold it to him just 20 minutes earlier, but he couldn't really give them a name. As the investigation continued, police found surveillance footage from a nearby Walmart from earlier that same day, showing Chemirmir and Harris in the store at the same time, and then a silver Nissan Altima following her car out of the parking lot. He was charged with capital murder for Harris's death and assault for the attack on Bartel. Now, seeing that there might be a pattern here, the Dallas County medical examiner started to re-examine all unaccompanied deaths of elderly people from the past few years where jewelry had been reported missing. That was a total of 750 cases, making it one of the largest and most complex investigations in the state's history. They were able to narrow those down using Chemirmir's cell phone data, which placed him at or very near the scenes of 24 suspicious deaths. The women's jewelry was also a big chunk of evidence. On his phone were images and posts to OfferUp, which is a reselling app similar to Craigslist, with several pieces of the women's jewelry. Further investigation would uncover that he'd sold more than $91,000 worth of jewelry to the Diamond and Gold Exchange pawn shop in North Dallas. And those $2 bills? Harris's son-in-law testified that that was kind of her thing, to give $2 bills as gifts. He said she would purchase bundles of them from the bank, specifically for that reason. Anyway, the Dallas County prosecutor chose to only charge him for 2 murders, those of Lou Harris and Mary Brooks, and each of those would be tried separately. And though this case would qualify for the death penalty, the prosecutor chose not to pursue that. The Collin County prosecutor started with 18 murder indictments against him, but in the end decided to charge him with only 5. Minnie Campbell, Carolyn McPhee, Martha Williams, Miriam Nelson, and Ann Conklin. He hasn't said if he's going to go for the death penalty or not. On November 11th, 2021, Chemirmir's first trial began in Dallas County for Harris's murder. Chemirmir pled not guilty, his defense being that all the evidence against him was circumstantial. There was no physical evidence like fingerprints or DNA or even any witnesses placing him at any of the crime scenes. And although Mary Bartel had sadly passed away in 2020, her videotaped deposition was played for the court as evidence. Then the first curveball of what would be several was thrown when one of his defense attorneys, Philip Hayes, was arrested for solicitation of prostitution in the middle of the trial. Regardless, the trial continued through the rest of the week without incident. However, when it came time for jury deliberations, there was another problem. They were hopelessly deadlocked, with one juror refusing to budge. So, with a hung jury, the judge declared a mistrial. His retrial began April 25th, 2022, but not without more drama. The trial had to be delayed for 4 hours because one of the jurors just didn't show up, and two, another juror recognized one of the victim's family members who was present in court. A constable had to go and get that one juror who had apparently just forgotten he had jury duty and had gone to work. Anyway, after that delay, the trial got started, and this one went much quicker. The prosecution showed much of the same evidence, but in a slightly different order, and the defense was the same as before. This trial only lasted 3 days, and the jury only had to deliberate for 40 minutes before bringing down their verdict: guilty. His sentence was automatic: life in prison without parole. His next trial will be again in Dallas County, this time for the murder of Mary Brooks. As of the time that I'm filming this, no court date has been set yet. Collin County prosecutors have stated they want to wait until after the Dallas County trial to bring their cases to court, so there's no date on that one yet either. Besides the criminal cases, there were, of course, civil suits brought against some of the senior living communities where Chemirmir's victims had lived. The families of 8 of his victims who resided at the Tradition Prestonwood all filed wrongful death lawsuits against the company and its CEO, Jonathan Perlman, alleging that the company prioritized profits over people and concealed what happened on their premises from both their residents and the police. According to their suit, a whistleblower employee and some former residents told the plaintiffs that the Tradition Prestonwood had conducted an internal investigation on Chemirmir before he was arrested, where they reviewed footage of him on surveillance cameras and, quote, knew he was all over the facility. The employee claimed Perlman had threatened to fire anyone who talked about it and had provided all employees with a script for what to say if someone called asking about Chemirmir. The Tradition Prestonwood has denied all of these allegations, and as of the time that I'm filming this, the suit is still ongoing. Another lawsuit was brought against Edgemere by the children of Phyllis Payne, which also alleged poor security. The lawsuit was settled, and a few months later, Edgemere filed for bankruptcy. Like with so many other tragedies like this, the families of the victims pushed hard for reforms to make sure this kind of thing didn't happen again. Thanks to their efforts, in 2021, a bill was passed requiring that next of kin be notified when the cause of death on a death certificate is changed. Known as Maryland's Law, HB 723 easily passed both chambers and was signed into law by Governor Greg Abbott. Another bill, SB 1132, tightened up enforcement and oversight of cash for gold businesses and pawn shop. It was signed into law in 2021 as well. However, the 2 bills that specifically address safety inside senior living communities failed to pass. One bill would have created a voluntary safety certification program to encourage things like background checks for employees. Another bill would have made facilities liable for negligent deaths. Neither of these bills passed. And though he was only charged for the deaths of 20 women, that's still a lot of people. Investigators believe he's responsible for as many as 24 murders. That's a shocking number of victims, more than many of the big infamous serial killers that have dominated headlines across the country. But barely anyone outside of the DFW area is even aware of him. Maybe it's because his victims weren't young and beautiful. Maybe the way he killed them, which was much more characteristic of the way female serial killers operate, wasn't interesting enough. And maybe it's because the Johnny Depp Amber Heard lawsuit is kind of taking the oxygen out of all the rooms. But I think it comes down to the common attitude that since elderly people are about to die anyway, why waste time and resources investigating their deaths? It's exactly this attitude that allowed Chemirmir to get away with killing so many people. His victims, even though they were in their 80s and 90s, were still living their best lives, dancing, painting, volunteering. They were parents, grandparents, siblings, aunts, and uncles who were dearly loved and missed by their families. Their lives were no less important or valuable because of their age. I'm glad Billy Chemirmir was caught and put behind bars. I hope he gets convicted on all the other charges too, so as many families as possible can get some justice. And I also hope that this tragedy will get more attention and will push senior living facilities to tighten up their security and police departments to pay more attention to any sudden death, regardless of the person's age. So if you liked this story, go ahead and give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel. You can also support me on Patreon, where you can get early access to videos, bonus content, and free Murder Nerd merch. So the links for all that are in the description. Till next time, Darklings.